When you spend a lot of time observing avoidantly attached people, one thing becomes especially noticeable. Although every person is different, there are certain patterns that show up again and again. Their relationships, family dynamics, work struggles, emotional difficulties, and romantic experiences may look different on the surface, but underneath, many of them share similar ways of handling closeness, conflict, and emotional connection. One pattern that often stands out is how difficult it can be for avoidant individuals to express vulnerable emotions directly. Sometimes feelings that are hard to communicate come out through frustration or anger instead. This can be especially noticeable in people who already struggle with emotional regulation. It doesn't mean every avoidant person has anger problems, but difficulty expressing emotions can certainly shape how those emotions eventually surface. So how can you recognize that an avoidant person has formed a deep emotional bond with someone? More importantly, how can you recognize who they've genuinely become attached to? When an avoidant person emotionally bonds with someone, that connection can become extremely meaningful to them. They usually don't give their trust, commitment, or emotional attachment to just anyone. It often takes a long time for them to decide that someone feels safe enough to truly keep in their life. One major sign is when they can be with someone who's comfortable saying, "We don't have to agree on everything." For an avoidant, that can feel incredibly reassuring. They may fear that intimacy means being controlled, pressured, or forced to change, but when their partner can voice a different opinion without turning the disagreement into a battle, the avoidant person gets a powerful message. You can be yourself here, and I don't need to change you to love you. That sense of acceptance can actually make them more open to compromise. When people feel attacked or judged, they naturally become defensive. But when an avoidant feels accepted, even amid disagreement, their defenses can soften. Ironically, once they no longer feel pressured to change, they may become much more willing to make changes on their own. Another powerful indicator is simply staying in their life over time. This doesn't mean you should tolerate poor treatment, stay in an unhealthy relationship, or wait forever for someone to become emotionally available. That's not the message. The point is that avoidant individuals often develop strong emotional attachments to people who've provided a steady sense of familiarity, reliability, and emotional safety. Consistency matters deeply to them. Once they've taken a long time to decide that someone belongs in their life, they may become surprisingly loyal to that person. Think about how an avoidant might carefully research a house or car before finally choosing one. They may take their time making the decision, but once they've decided, they don't necessarily want to keep searching. They can approach relationships in a similar way. Once someone becomes associated with safety, familiarity, and trust, letting that person disappear can be much harder than they might openly admit. If you've shared a long, stable history together, that history itself can become part of the emotional bond. Another quality that deeply attracts avoidant individuals is self-awareness. Imagine someone recognizes that they may have contributed to a problem. Maybe they realized they sent too many messages while their partner was working, became overly demanding during a stressful moment, or reacted in a way that created unnecessary pressure. Instead of immediately blaming the avoidant, they can look at their own behavior and honestly say, "This is something I need to work on too." That can be incredibly powerful for an avoidant person. They don't feel like all the responsibility for fixing the relationship has landed on their shoulders. Instead, they see someone willing to take accountability and grow alongside them. That kind of emotional maturity can make an avoidant feel understood rather than judged, and it can build a surprisingly deep sense of connection. And then there's something closely tied to self-awareness, genuine apologies. When both people are capable of admitting when they've made a mistake, the relationship becomes much safer emotionally. An avoidant person may struggle with vulnerability, and apologizing can make them feel exposed. But when they see their partner taking responsibility without using the apology as a weapon, it becomes easier for them to lower their defenses too. It's not about always being the first person to apologize, taking responsibility for everything, or accepting blame that doesn't belong to you. It's about creating a relationship where both people can say, "I was wrong," without fearing humiliation, rejection, or punishment. For an avoidant individual, that kind of environment can be deeply bonding because vulnerability no longer feels like weakness. It starts to feel like something two people can safely share. And when an avoidant starts associating one specific person with acceptance, consistency, self-awareness, and emotional safety, that person can become far more important to them than they may ever openly express. It also gives them the feeling that their needs can exist inside the relationship too. For example, imagine you tell them, "I'm sorry. I realize I was texting you too much because I was feeling anxious, and I know that wasn't fair. I'm working on it, and I hope you can forgive me." That kind of apology can have a much deeper effect than you might realize. It doesn't just show accountability. It also makes the avoidant feel safer about taking responsibility when they make mistakes themselves. They see that vulnerability isn't going to be used against them. More importantly, your apology communicates something powerful. Your needs matter, but mine matter too. You're showing that the relationship isn't about one person constantly demanding and the other constantly giving. Both people are allowed to have needs, boundaries, mistakes, and emotions. For an avoidant individual, that can strengthen their sense of commitment. They begin to feel that they don't have to protect themselves from being completely overlooked. They can start believing that the person they're with will actually notice what they need and care about it. And when that belief grows stronger, emotional bonding grows stronger too. This can also create a positive cycle. You take responsibility, they feel safer doing the same, you both become more open, and the relationship gradually becomes more secure. Avoidant individuals can find this incredibly attractive because they're often drawn to people who demonstrate emotional maturity rather than simply demanding it from them. Another important sign is how someone responds when the avoidant doesn't give them exactly what they want. Let's say one partner strongly wants to see each other every other day, while the avoidant partner only feels comfortable meeting once a week. Neither person is necessarily wrong. One person may genuinely need more physical closeness, while the other may genuinely need more personal space. Now imagine they've argued about this repeatedly, and eventually the avoidant says, "I can't keep doing this. I need more time for myself. My job is demanding, I have other responsibilities, and once a week is what I can realistically give right now. I'm not saying I don't care about you. I'm telling you honestly what I'm capable of." An avoidant person may communicate this very bluntly, sometimes even saying, "This is what I can offer. If that's not enough for you, you can decide what you want to do." If the other person immediately reacts with anger, accusations, or emotional pressure, "You don't care about me. You're so cold. How can you treat me like this? You obviously don't love me." The avoidant may feel even more unsafe. Their instinct can be to create greater distance, because the conversation confirms their fear that closeness will eventually come with pressure and emotional overwhelm. But imagine a completely different response. You could say, "I'm disappointed because I wanted to spend more time together, and this isn't what I originally hoped for, but I appreciate you being honest with me. I understand better now why you're asking for more space. I still want this relationship, and I want to see if we can make it work. For now, I'm willing to try once a week, and maybe we can revisit this later when things are calmer." That doesn't mean abandoning your own needs. It means communicating them without turning the situation into a battle. That kind of response can immediately lower an avoidant person's defenses. They no longer feel trapped, cornered, or forced to prove their love. Instead, they may think, "She heard me, she didn't attack me, she still cares about me, even though she didn't get exactly what she wanted." And that feeling can open room for something unexpected. The avoidant may eventually become more willing to give. When someone feels respected instead of pressured, they may voluntarily offer more because they no longer feel their freedom is being taken away. They can begin thinking, "This person understood me when I was struggling. Maybe I can make more room for what they need too." Another quality avoidant individuals often deeply appreciate is someone who chooses peace over unnecessary emotional chaos. This doesn't mean ignoring problems, suppressing your feelings, or pretending everything is fine. It simply means understanding that not every disagreement has to become a major confrontation. Sometimes the healthiest response is recognizing when both people are emotionally overwhelmed and saying, "We're getting nowhere right now. Let's take a break and come back to this later." You can still address the issue. You can still have boundaries. You can still explain what hurt you, but you don't have to destroy the entire relationship while discussing one difficult moment. If the relationship is generally healthy and one disagreement isn't an emergency, sometimes it makes sense to pause the conversation, reconnect, do something enjoyable together, and return to the problem when both of you are calmer. For an avoidant, that ability to maintain connection without turning every conflict into emotional chaos can feel incredibly safe. And when they repeatedly experience that kind of peace with someone, they may begin associating that person with something they deeply value, emotional safety without losing their sense of independence. Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply pause the conversation and say, "I appreciate you telling me how you feel. I don't think we need to solve this tonight, especially because we're both emotionally overwhelmed. Let's give ourselves some space and come back to it when we're calmer." You can still have the conversation later. You can still explain your position and work through the disagreement. The important part is knowing when you've reached the point where continuing will only create more tension. Step away, get something to eat, watch something together, go for a walk, do something that reminds both of you that the relationship is bigger than one disagreement. Then, when you're both in a better emotional state, you can revisit the issue. For many avoidant individuals, that ability to pause without turning the pause into rejection can feel incredibly reassuring. They learn that conflict doesn't automatically mean the relationship is falling apart, and over time that can build a very strong emotional attachment to the person who gives them that sense of safety. And there's one final quality I think is incredibly important: having room for small mistakes. Most people want to feel that they can occasionally mess up without being judged, attacked, or made to feel like one mistake defines their entire character. Avoidant individuals can especially appreciate this because they may already carry a strong sensitivity to criticism and judgment. When someone gives them reasonable space to make a mistake, acknowledge it, correct it, and move forward, the relationship starts feeling much safer. They don't have to constantly worry that one imperfect moment will create a huge emotional confrontation. Think about something simple that happens in a long-term relationship. Maybe one partner tells the other, "Go out and enjoy yourself, spend time with your friends. I don't have a problem with that. I would just like you to be home around 1 o'clock in the morning because we have something important to do tomorrow." It's not about control. It's a mutual agreement based on their responsibilities. Maybe they have children, maybe they have to travel early the next morning. Maybe they have plans that require both of them to be rested. Whatever the reason, there's a legitimate reason for the request. Now imagine the avoidant partner gets caught up with friends and doesn't come home until 2 o'clock. The next morning, he admits it himself. "I stayed out later than I planned. I know I said I'd be home around 1 o'clock, but I didn't make it back until 2 o'clock. That's a small mistake. It doesn't automatically mean there's something wrong with the relationship." The other partner might understandably feel annoyed. She could say, "I appreciate you telling me. The reason I asked you to be home by 1 o'clock was because we have a busy morning, and now we're going to have to move a little faster to get everything done. Next time, please remember there's usually a reason behind what I'm asking." That's completely different from immediately exploding with accusations. "Where were you? Who were you with? Why can't you ever listen? You don't care about this family." Being tolerant doesn't mean pretending the mistake didn't happen. It doesn't mean abandoning your standards or letting someone repeatedly disregard your needs. It means you can acknowledge the mistake without turning it into a character attack. You can be disappointed and still be respectful. You can express frustration without creating emotional chaos. You can maintain your own perspective while giving the other person enough room to correct themselves. And that distinction is extremely important. Avoidant individuals can become deeply attached to people who allow them to remain human. People who understand that mistakes happen, that nobody gets everything right, and that one imperfect decision doesn't have to threaten the entire relationship. They don't need someone who constantly walks on eggshells around them. They need someone who can communicate honestly without making every problem feel catastrophic. So when you put all of these qualities together, you begin to see a pattern. It's the person who can disagree without creating a war. It's the person who's remained consistent over time. It's the person who's capable of looking at their own behavior and taking accountability. It's someone who can genuinely apologize. It's someone who doesn't immediately become reactive when things don't go their way. It's someone who values peace instead of constant emotional volatility. And finally, it's someone who can tolerate small mistakes without turning them into major relationship crises. These qualities can create an environment where an avoidant person gradually feels safe enough to become more emotionally invested. And if you're trying to build a healthier connection with an avoidant partner, repair a struggling relationship, or simply understand why certain behaviors create deeper bonding, these are important qualities to recognize. The goal isn't to chase someone, tolerate disrespect, or suppress your own needs just to keep them close. It's about creating a relationship where both people can communicate, make mistakes, take responsibility, maintain boundaries, and still feel emotionally safe. That's where real connection has room to grow.